He invited his poor ex-wife to shame her at his wedding, but she arrived in a limo with their triplet. He invited his poor ex-wife to his wedding, thinking it would be the final insult, the last dagger in her heart, but destiny was preparing something. No one in that lavish hall expected, because as the guests whispered about her past poverty and his shining wealth, the heavy doors of the venue opened, and everyone turned their eyes towards a sound that did not belong to struggle, but to luxury. It was the smooth purr of a limousine, and the hush that fell was like the silence before a storm. And then she stepped out, dressed not in torn clothes like the ones they remembered, but in a gown that shimmered like moonlight. And with her were, not one, not two, but 3 children who looked exactly like him. The groom froze. His bride gasped, and the guests leaned forward for answers, because the night that was meant to shame her had just turned into a theater of revelations. And here, dear viewers, is where you must pause for a moment. Hit that subscribe button, because the secrets that will unfold every 2 minutes will keep you on the edge of your seat forever. As this story is not just about revenge, it is about fate, justice, and the power of truth. Now, as she walked down the red carpet laid for another woman, the air was electric, her heels clicking like a countdown to disaster, but behind her innocent eyes of the triplets pierced the groom's heart, because he knew he had seen those faces before in the mirror every morning, and still he tried to laugh, pretending this was a joke. But deep inside he felt his empire shaking, and when his new bride whispered, "Who are those children?" his lips trembled, because for years he had hidden a truth that now stood in front of everyone, like a sword ready to cut through his lies. Yet he forced a smile and told the crowd she was desperate and wanted attention. But the silence of the room betrayed him, because no one believed. And the triplets stared at him with the kind of recognition no actor could fake. Suspense rose in the hall like smoke, and for a moment even the chandeliers seemed to flicker, as though the very light was uncertain whose side to shine upon. And she finally spoke, her voice trembling, but filled with fire, saying, "You invited me here to shame me, but tonight the world will see who you truly are." The guests gasped again. The bride turned pale, and the groom clenched his fists, knowing that in 2 minutes more his carefully painted image would collapse, because she carried more than scars, she carried proof. And the whispers began again. Is she telling the truth? Are those really his children? Or is this some act to stop the wedding suspense? Tightened, every heartstrings were pulled, and suddenly an old woman stood up. A woman everyone respected, his grandmother. She walked slowly with her cane, looked at the children and then at him, and whispered in front of everyone, "These eyes, these faces, they are ours. They carry our blood." And the hall shook with a wave of disbelief. The groom's face turned crimson. The bride screamed that this was impossible, but deep inside she feared she was about to marry a man who was hiding his darkest betrayal. Yet the ex-wife did not stop. She moved closer and closer, her words sharper than any knife, saying, "You left me in the dark when I was carrying your children. You left me to starve, to fight alone while you chased wealth and glitter, and today you thought I would come crawling. But see, I walk with the light of truth and with the strength of the family. You abandoned," her voice echoed. And again, dear viewers, if you are feeling the storm building, make sure you subscribe, because the next twist will break every expectation, and you will not want to miss it. The groom tried to cut her off, shouting, "She lies, she lies." But one of the children pulled out a locket, a small golden locket with his initials engraved, the same locket he had gifted her years ago. And the crowd erupted in shouts of shock. Mini suspense wrapped the moment like chains, and the bride covered her mouth, realizing the man she thought she knew had lived a double life. And as 2 minutes passed, the weight of truth grew heavier. One guest stood up demanding a DNA test right now, but the ex-wife smiled calmly, saying, "I do not need tests for truth, because truth reveals itself in time." And as if to prove her words, one of the children spoke softly in front. of everyone calling the groom daddy, and the sound of that word broke him like thunder, shattering glass. His knees shook, the bride grabbed his arm demanding answers, but he stood frozen, caught between lies and destiny, and as the clock ticked, suspense climbed again. The ex-wife revealed she had not come for revenge. She had not come for his wealth, but she came because the children wanted to see their father, even if he had turned into a stranger. Her words pierced the hall. The crowd murmured, and some guests even turned against the groom, whispering about his cruelty, his selfishness, and his betrayal. His bride tried to stand tall, saying, "This is our wedding. No one will ruin it." But her voice was weak like a candle flickering before the storm. And then the ex-wife dropped the next suspense, saying, "This wedding will not go on, because the past you tried to bury is standing right here in the light. And before you take vows of loyalty, you must answer the vows you already broke." The audience roared in shock. Tension rose every 2 minutes, like waves crashing stronger and stronger, and the groom's empire, his reputation, his future, all seemed to crumble in front of him as he realized this was not the night of victory he had dreamed. It was the night of reckoning, and still the story was only beginning. The hall was already trembling under the weight of truth when the groom finally found his voice, but every word he uttered seemed like a fragile glass ready to break. He shouted, "This is madness. This woman is here to ruin me." But even as he said it, his eyes betrayed him because they could not deny the resemblance that tied him to the triplets, like a chain forged by fate. The guests leaned in desperate to see what would happen next, and his bride clung to his arm, terrified of the storm that was now ripping her dream wedding apart. But the ex-wife's voice cut through the noise, strong and unshaken, saying, "You cannot hide anymore. The truth has arrived, and no amount of gold, no amount of lies can bury it." Now, her words carried fire, and for 2 minutes the hall was heavy with suspense, everyone wondering whether he would finally confess or whether he would let his world burn around him. And then the unexpected happened. One of the triplets walked forward, holding something in his hand, a small photo, crumpled and faded. It was a picture of the groom holding the ex-wife years ago, before the wealth, before the betrayal, and the child held it high for everyone to see. The hall gasped. Mini suspense broke through the air again, because no one could deny it was him in the photo, his arm wrapped around the woman he now called a liar. The bride staggered backward, her dress heavy with shame, and the whispers grew louder. "He is guilty. He is guilty." The ex-wife's eyes glistened with tears, but not of weakness. They were tears of strength, of a woman who had carried the storm alone for years and now finally saw justice unfolding. And here, dear viewers, if your heart is pounding, if you feel the chill of betrayal turning into victory, make sure you subscribe, because the next twist is darker, deeper, and more shocking than what you expect. The groom tried to seize the photo, but the child pulled back, trembling but brave, saying, "You left us, but we are not afraid of you anymore." The crowd erupted again, and in those 2 minutes the hall turned from celebration to courtroom, where truth was, judge and lies were defendant. But before he could recover, the ex-wife stepped closer and revealed another suspense. She said, "I did not come here alone, you see. When you abandoned us, someone else stood by me, someone you thought was beneath you, a man you mocked for being simple, but he raised your children as his own, and today he is outside waiting to step in." And the doors creaked, as if on cue, and another figure walked in, tall, calm, dressed not in silk, but in dignity. And the hall gasped again, mini suspense tightening throats, because this man was known to some. He was once the groom's driver, the man he had dismissed with insults years ago. But now he walked with a quiet power because he had done what the groom never could love, the woman and children unconditionally. The groom's pride shattered into pieces. The bride screamed, "Who is he?" And the ex-wife answered, "The father they deserve, The hall shook with cries. The groom tried to attack the man, but guards stepped in and held him back, his mask falling completely every 2 minutes. Another blow landed against his false empire, and then the final suspense of the night came. The ex-wife revealed papers. She held all along adoption papers, guardianship papers, proof that while he had been chasing vanity, she had built a fortress of love around her children with the man who truly deserved the title of father. The guests rose to their feet, some cheering, some crying, and the bride collapsed, realizing her wedding was nothing but ashes. The groom screamed that he still had power, wealth, influence, but the crowd turned away. No one listened, because money cannot silence truth. The ex-wife lifted her children, her voice echoing, saying, "This is the end of his story, but the beginning of ours." And with that she turned, walked out to the waiting limo, leaving behind the ruins of a man who had thought he was untouchable. Suspense hung heavy in the air for the last 2 minutes, as guests whispered that justice had finally been served, and as the limo door closed and the children smiled, the world saw that true wealth was never gold or diamonds, but love, loyalty, and courage. And viewers, if you believe in that kind of wealth, if you want more stories that bring truth to light, then subscribe now, because what comes next in our world of tales will shake your soul. The groom remained inside, broken, humiliated, his empire destined to fall, his name stained forever, and the bride vanished into shadows. But outside, under the stars, the ex-wife and her children finally embraced a future of strength, dignity, and triumph. And so the night that began with an invitation of shame ended with a lesson that no one would forget.